This is the first crash damaged Lamborghini Revuelto, and today I'm going to try and drive it for the first time. I've done it. It's going to start. Only months ago, this was a brand new Lamborghini Revuelto, costing the previous owner £600,000. But one small accident later, it now looks like this. And I bought it for a fraction of that price. £30,000. Only issue is, we've got to fix it. Yeah! Oh. And with us knowing nothing about hybrids, or without anyone attempting to ever do this before, we couldn't even get the car started. Sending it. No, don't do it, does it? So today, we've not only got to attempt to fix it, we've also got to work out why this car won't start. This is the start of the parts to replace. This is our main base here. And inside this is a £55,000 front subframe made out of carbon fibre reinforced plastic, apparently. It's that special. And everything that we've taken off on the front end fits onto that. Disclaimer, we have no idea what we're doing, but according to the internet as well, apparently not many other people do because nobody else has worked on it. We've got to figure it out as we go along, but we hopefully will be able to start it afterwards. Let's get this out and start building up the front end, and we'll go from there. This is half price of what I paid for our first house. And to be honest, you don't get much for your money, but you do get a bunch of certificates, so I guess it's worth it. Let's get all of that onto that. This is easy. The front subframe holds loads of vital components on the car, and all of this stuff can only be assembled one way. A lot of the cables and wiring go on first, then all the components afterwards. The anti-roll bar goes on there, the steering rack goes on there, and then there's a bunch of hoses and water pumps for the cooling of the battery system, which we're still trying to figure out ourselves. Teamwork makes the dream work. Now, it looks complicated, but when we've took it all apart, it's not too bad. This can all be broken down into separate little pieces, like your steering rack, your anti-roll bar, your cooling for your battery, your aircon compressor, which works from the hybrid system, separate water pumps, which pump water through the hybrid battery, coolers, which cool the oil, which go through the differential at the front, which is on its own separate ecosystem. And speaking of the differential at the front, the oil lines which run to it are damaged. So Dom's at it with changing them over. Oh, coolant, or is that oil? Oil.
You got a bucket, Tony?
As a lot of this hybrid system relies heavily on cooling, I don't want to take any risk with any damaged pipes, which could restrict the flow of oil or restrict the flow of coolant. So some nice new ones are added. I've become a hybrid. Then finally, we're back onto the front subframe to make sure everything's connected. And once we're happy with it, we've got it on the toolbox, we're going to slide it underneath the car and hopefully lower the Revuelto down onto the subframe. And then we can slide the bolts in from underneath it to hold it to the actual chassis of the car. And once we've got those in, we can confirm that it's secure. Then I'm going to go into the middle and start connecting up all the pipes and electrical connections that connect from the subframe to the actual car. And there's endless amount of coolant hoses and a lot of bolts which hold the subframe to the chassis. But luckily, I didn't remove this front subframe that long ago, so it's fresh in my mind where everything went-ish. One of the last few things is the steering column connecting up to the steering rack, which you can see me doing here, tightening up the pinch bolt there, then connecting up one of the high voltage lines underneath the car and putting all the trays underneath it to cover it. Then I'm back over on the right hand side suspension, connecting all that side suspension back to the subframe. Last few little bits now, which I have no idea what they are, but I know where they went. And that should just about do it. Finally, I think we're back to where we was, but without a broken subframe now. Now there's a few bits missing, so I've sort of figured out all this hybrid system, still can't work out what's doing what and what is doing where or what. I don't know what it's doing, basically. But there's a big plug here, there's a big plug here, and there's another big plug all here. And they go into a big box which goes here. But I can't put this big box in just yet because remember we had that broken plastic little piece on the back of that battery. And then also, it's broken all this plastic shroud in there which goes into the heater fans inside the car. So I've ordered this piece of plastic here, and then we're going to try and solve the problem with the little bit of broken plastic on the back of the battery system. But other than that, that suspension's on, everything's all connected, and I think it's time we can start building up this suspension, which is going to be interesting. And actually, we might get this car sitting on 4 wheels soon. Let's go.
So it looks like the accident pretty much obliterated most of the left side suspension. Not much of it is actually usable. So I've had to buy quite a lot of it.
This is everything we need to build up the suspension on the front left hand side. Now a lot of this is interchangeable of some Porsches. Are you going to save much money changing it off a Porsche? Probably not. If it was off a Ford Transit van, you probably would have. The main thing here which I want to announce, what was sickeningly expensive, this brake disc. £9,000 for that. So we treat that preciously. You're meant to replace them in pairs, but as this car is so new and it's not done thousands of miles, we're only replacing one because I don't fancy spending another £9,000. That one's perished. Should we give that to someone?
Yeah, we could do with the merch.
Yeah, you know what? We're going to sign that disc there, £9,000 worth of disc, and it has got a few cracks in it, and we're going to give that to someone who buys some of the merch in the next 50 orders, say. We're just going to throw it in there because it's quite cool. You can make a clock out of it or something like that.
Okay, now we've just got to work out what's usable off the old suspension and what isn't. And the disc certainly isn't.
No way!
No, you didn't. You just needed the guns.
Hey!
Now the drive shaft's out the way, we can loosen the one bolt that holds the disc to the wheel hub, take this £9,000 disc off, and we're all gonna sign. Each and every one of us. Me, my dad, cameraman Matt, Liam, Danny, Hannah, not forgetting Kevin. And someone randomly selected who buys merch will receive it. Next up, the heat shields coming off the old wheel hub. And here's all the new components. Let's start assembling. The actual suspension setup isn't actually far off what a GT3 setup's like. Double wishbone, and it's all pretty light. Easy to assemble.
Okay, first thing in, drive shaft, which does, well, should just push in to that front diff. There we go, drive shaft in.
Next thing is the shock absorber and spring. This is one complete unit. Of course, with all of this, the repair bill's adding up. But we'll get a total when we finish the build. The bolt I'm doing up here is for the nose lift. Fluid gets pushed into the top of the strut, which then lifts up the front end of the car when you get to a speed bump. And all those extra stuff, of course, costs more money. But a Lamborghini without nose lift is definitely harder for resale. Next thing is all the wishbones going on.
Some things just never change with Lamborghini and Ferrari. Spacers, because things weren't right when they first made it. I don't know, but there was 2 in the front, 1 in the back on this side, and on the other side there was 2 each side. So we're just going to roll with it the same. I presume when we come to wheel align it, we'll be able to see whether that's correct. So they slot in the back. 1 in the back.
I assume these spacers are put in there to adjust the camber of the wheel, how much it tilts inwards or outwards. So we'll need to get this adjusted afterwards.
Damaged. New one. Oh look, it's got an extra bit on it.
These sensors here, which my dad's putting on, are for the headlights. These will send a signal on how high the car's sitting. So if the car's sitting pretty low, because the suspension is compressed, then it will adjust the headlights upwards so the driver can see more. And same thing if the car's sitting high, it will adjust the headlights down, so it doesn't blind oncoming traffic. Now, the brake disc. Made out of full carbon fibre. Although it's really expensive, it is really delicate. But the difference between steel discs and carbon discs are night and day. They're just so much better and last a lot longer. Luckily, the caliper just got away with a few scratches on it, but it is reusable. But I'm definitely going to get it touched in. And that is one complete left-hand side suspension, with one bolt missing. Right, this is the front frame, which comes off the side here, which luckily is aluminium and not carbon fibre, so it wasn't too expensive. Now, there's loads of stuff on this front frame. There's radiators, aircon condensers, and weird thing like this. This is a speaker, so when you drive it in electric mode, which will be, for me, never, it plays like a little like hum, so passengers are aware you come in, it's like that. It's the most stupidest thing, but look how big it is. Slides up into this little cage here, like that. The more things you have to add to electric cars. Right, that's that done. Now we've got to work out how all these rads go on. This is sometimes a problem when you're rebuilding crash damaged cars. On a car this new, you have to order every part individually, and there's normally loads of them, like these little rubber grommets I'm putting in the frame here. Now luckily for me, I've got the other side to use as a reference so I can copy it, but when you don't have that, it can take ages for you to try and work out where all of the stuff goes. And the manufacturers will say there's so many little parts to keep insurance prices down. For example, if you had a small accident on the front and it only damaged one of the grommets or one small radiator, then the cost to fix it would be a lot lower than what it would be if you had to buy, say, this full frame with all the radiators connected. It kind of makes sense in some ways, but then not in others, because then sometimes it takes even more labour to fit all the individual parts of the car. But we're getting there. This is a fun bit. So this hose, don't think it matters which way it goes round. A hose clamp goes on it on one side and then slides onto the side of the radiator. And then this thing. Another hose clamp goes on. Right, then this thing goes in. Just a tube, another thing. Oh, it's in. Okay, hose clamp, go in. Oh, I think that's on enough. And then after that, bolting it. I get it because it's meant to be a bleed screw. But I mean, why did they need to make a hose, two clamps, and that thing that goes in it, then to put a bolt in it, when it could have just come off the radiator? Bit weird. But okay. I think it's ready to go on. We've got one issue. This bracket here is a bit bent, and you can't buy this bracket separate there. You have to buy this full leg to have the bracket on it. So if you was an insurance job, if you was an insurance company and you were repairing this, you couldn't just bend that back like what I'm about to do. You'd have to buy a whole new leg just to get that part, and then it would just effectively write off the car, which is also dumb as well. So like the parts you actually do need, you can't buy separate there, and then the ones that you don't, like that bleed nipple, buy all you like. So yeah, it's only Mansory glued on as well, look at that. It's just literally Mansory glued on. So this part completely contradicts all of the little parts that I've added to the radiator. Why I can't just buy this bracket separately, I don't know. So that's forced me into trying to bend it back like I'm doing now. Luckily, it is made out of aluminium, which is super soft and quite easy to bend. But I'm sure an insurance company wouldn't be allowed to do this. Luckily, I'm not an insurance company. Let's see if it lines up. Ooh, look at that. Pretty much on. Yeah.
That's pretty good, to be honest.
Yeah, I think we're good. Just need to put some riv nuts in there, and that'll bolt in. Riv nuts. This gives us something to screw into without using a nut and bolt on the other end, because that ain't OEM, and we're all about being OEM.
You just hammered a bracket with a...
OEM. So in goes the riv nut. Once you push it into the hole, you squash it into place, pull out the tool, and now you've got a place where the bolt can thread into without having a nut on the other side. And we're doing that for the top and bottom part of the bracket. Once they're in, we can now refit the whole frame with all the radiators back onto the chassis leg. And that seemed to have worked. Next up is the carbon fibre front piece, which also attaches to the front subframe. As you can see, the old one was completely damaged and smashed to pieces. And bad news for me, this new part was over £10,000. But I've got no choice and I've got to replace it. Luckily, it's not as complex as the front subframe to go on. There's only about 10 bolts which hold it to it, but the car's looking way better now. That is everything complete on the front-ish, to an extent. All the aircon lines are plumbed in, all the coolant lines are plumbed in. We're missing a few shrouds, like these bits on that side, but we can get to them. They're not vital for making the car start, which we're hopefully trying to do by the end of this video, at least. Now there's another thing which could be like stopping us from starting the car, which was the brake pressure. We did clamp the lines in the brake pedal to try and get a bit of brake pressure, but on automatics, sometimes you need to push the brake down to be able to start the car. And if you've not got enough brake pressure, it might not start, which could be a theory. And the reason we can't get brake pressure is because, well, this brake line here is completely broken. So what we're going to do, instead of ordering one from Lamborghini, because I think this actual metal line here is around 80 odd quid, my dad's just going to make one, because we think it literally just goes all the way back down there and through to that reservoir there. So we're hoping we can actually change that, and then we should be able to get one of these hoses which goes into the caliper. You can do it now.
Oh, I'm on set.
Here's the steel brake line that we've got to replace, and it runs all the way up to the ABS pump. But the good news, the steel brake lines on the front are a lot shorter than the ones which run to the back brakes, so they're much easier to replicate.
You look very professional. You've got all your tools laid out.
What I needed was a bit of string so I could measure the pipe with a bit of string, but unfortunately we haven't got any string. So we're using some of Liam's electric wire.
Right, okay. Very professional.
With this wire, my dad's able to line it up with the old brake pipe, and then he'll know exactly the right size he needs to cut from the copper line to replicate it.
That's how long the pipe's got to be. Ooh, not supposed to do it like that.
Now that the copper line's cut, he needs to make sure that the ends are nice and flush with no restrictions. So he's using a special tool for that.
New end, look. New piece. Like I said in the last video, always remember to put your end on first.
So he's got the brake fitting already on the copper pipe, and now he's clamping it into this tool. He then uses this other tool to flare out the end of the copper line. Once he's done this, the brake fitting that is put on won't be able to slide off, and it should marry up to the existing brake line on the car nicely, because there's a female and a male end to the brake lines. On the other end, it's going to do exactly the same. Now we have the copper brake line in the right length with both of the fittings on each end. All he's got to do now is bend the copper line in the exact same way that the OEM one was bent. And once he's done that, he's going to give it a lick of paint.
First up, etching primer.
This is only to just make it look like the original one.
Etching primer done. Satin black next.
Once this goes on the car, I don't think it'll be noticeable that it's an aftermarket one. And in fact, copper is actually an improvement. He's now got to guide the one that is made up onto the car, down past all the wiper motor, and then screw it into the ABS pump. And that's one brake line complete. And that's how to make a brake pipe. It's OEM, but with copper. And copper don't rust, does it?
Nope.
Better than
That's
OEM.
why it's more expensive.
Is that why they don't do it from standard? Because it's too expensive. And also,
Not really.
You wake up in the morning, all your brake parts will be stolen. Hi. We're moving in the right direction to get this thing started. Little bits are holding us back now, but this should help. Now, before we try and start this, to do on the front end, there's a few more little bits. It's obviously not going to start without all this connected. And to get this connected, I need to put this shroud in, which has just arrived, so we can do that in a minute. Now, my dad has made the brake line back here, but now we need a flexi hose to connect that brake line to this caliper. So I need to make that, because it's probably going to be cheaper to make than to buy from Lamborghini. Well, it's most definitely going to be cheaper to make than to buy from Lamborghini. Once we have that brake hose, we'll then have brake pressure in the car. So the car will know when I'm pushing the brake, because I'll actually have some pressure under my foot because there'll be brake fluid in there. And at the minute, there's no brake fluid because it's not connected. Hopefully, that makes sense. Another thing, as cars get newer, the more kind of safety woke they become. So it really wouldn't surprise me that because all the airbags are out in this car because they deployed in the accident, that the car probably won't start because it thinks the airbags are deployed or they're not even plugged in. And that is what is in this box from the airbag team. Now in here are the two seat belts that we originally taken out, the two curtain airbags which were deployed and we taken out, and the seat airbag which deployed in the passenger seat as well. These are the original airbags, and what the airbag team have done, have reset them. I didn't even know that they could do that. So they've reset them, which saved us actually buying new ones, and they could do that as long as they don't have any holes in the airbags or anything like that. So that has saved a fortune. The only thing we can't do is the steering wheel airbag, but we'll get onto that. For now, let's start refitting these. Let's do this. First thing to go in is a curtain airbag. These actually bolt to the carbon fibre tub just behind this A-pillar trim here. I've actually taken a little shortcut here without taking the A-pillar trim out, which saved me a fair bit of time. Next up, the seat belt. This is bolted to the car in a very specific place. If you don't get it in the right spot, then the seat belt actually won't pull out or retract. You'll know the feeling yourself. If you go around a corner and try to pull your seat belt out, it'll be locked because it's not in its correct resting spot. Hopefully that makes sense. Once both of the curtain airbags are in and the seat belts are in, I can then put the driver's side seat in, and now I've got the passenger side seat airbag. Now this airbag is gonna go in the side of this seat here, if I can remember how it goes in. So that kind of like slides in, sits in there, but we won't put this seat in just yet because what I'm going to do is put that airbag in, and then all of this is going to have to be restitched. I don't know whether they can save that or whether they're going to have to put a new bit of leather in. Hopefully not, but AutoTrim have got it. I'm going to put this airbag in, and I still think it will start with the seat out, because that would be stupid if you can't start your car if there's not another seat in it. But I don't know, you never know. Let's just get this in and then we can go from there. This just hooks into its place, electrical connector goes on, and there's one bolt which holds it in. And that is job done for that airbag. Now when I was around the back here, I can see, look, it looks like there's some little kind of trims here, and maybe you can actually replace this part. Only thing I'm worried about is this bit of leather here, but again, I think they might just be able to replace this piece here if they can match the leather. Everything is all in, we just need the steering wheel airbag, which I've got over here. So this was the exploded bag. You can't actually repair this. Well, at least I don't think you can. The airbag blows out, breaks the leather here, and also some of the wires are broken on the back. I don't think I could order an airbag from Lamborghini. There just wasn't on the parts list when I tried to find one, and it's a long wait for one as well. But I found this one, and I got this off eBay from Poland. Why there's one in Poland on eBay, I don't know. I'm not going to ask questions. I bought it straight away as soon as I seen it. It was around £600. It's got all the wires on the back. It should just plug straight in. So lucky find, really. Again, these are really easy to install. Electrical connector clips in, then you can just push the airbag in place. After that, I've just got to put the cowling on the back of the steering wheel. And that is job done there. Here is like, I think it's a battery or the charging thing for the battery of the Revuelto. Now, this part here, where the plastic actually goes on there and the pipes go in there, because these are coolant lines. The coolant travels through it and cools down all the battery system. This part's broke. To get this part, you have to buy the full battery, which is £8,000. So we're not going to do that. I found one from Porsche, and it does have similar connections on, but they come straight out. I'll pop it on the screen, but the connections aren't quite right. But we've got a Bob, and Bob thinks, well, hopes, knows that he can repair this. But are you going to use metal instead?
No, I'm going to make a whole new one. So I'll take that belt and plate off, drop it onto a piece of stainless, draw around it, and then fabricate a pipe and weld the pipe to the plate.
And that will be steel.
Stainless steel.
So that would be. So this is the issue as well. A lot of people were saying 3D print it, 3D print it. But if we 3D print it and then coolant's traveling through it and it's really hot, I think it's just going to eat it.
And melt.
Yeah, exactly. So metal is better. It probably should have been made out of metal from the start.
Probably.
So, but yeah, Bob's going to fabricate that in 1 hour. Now this is a true talent. Really, all I'm doing is unbolting stuff and bolting it back together, in a sense. Whereas Bob can actually manufacture and make stuff. Something I'd love to be able to do. But where you start, I'd never know. Bob is literally making this plastic fitting from stainless steel in his workshop. And remember, this has got to be perfect. There can't be any leaks of coolant going into the battery, but he's confident enough. He looks like he's making it in 2 pieces. The actual fitting part, which goes into the battery, and then a separate part where the hose clips onto. Then he's going to weld them together. We give it a quick polish up, and honestly, within about 2 hours, he'd done it. I've just seen this, yeah, but I'm actually going to film your reaction to this, right? But okay, bearing in mind that's what it's like. So that was the part. Okay, yep. Bob's been away for what? How long?
Couple hours.
Like, just picture, right, think in your head what do you expect, because I expected something completely different. So now, Bob, show him what you've done. That's
better than the original.
That's what I said. That's mental, innit? It's
does it
chrome.
fit? Does it fit?
Yeah,
Okay.
it literally slots in like a glove.
He's all right, isn't he?
Cheers, Bob. Everyone knows where to go to the machine shop, because that is stupid. Now we can start installing it back on the car. What a legend Bob is. And we're going to be using him again later on in the video. So here's the situation. Parts still haven't arrived, but in the time that I've been waiting for parts, I've done a bit of research and I'm slightly worried. This big chunky thing here is the battery charger, I believe, which also requires cooling. So it's not ideal to charge the hybrid battery without any coolant in there, because, well, it would get too hot. This thing is a converter, so this must convert the electric to a higher voltage or a lower voltage, depending on what or where you're doing. And then you've got the electric motors on the front differential, but the actual battery is underneath the car and kind of runs through the whole center section, the center console of the car. Now, the thing that I've been sort of researching is why this car won't start, and these batteries are apparently quite similar to the ones that are used on the Audi e-tron. Of course, Lamborghini is part of the Volkswagen and Audi group, so why wouldn't they use batteries from a Audi e-tron, although an Audi e-tron is a complete electric car, but it may be similar. Here's my problem though. On an Audi e-tron, if it has an accident and the airbags deploy, it cuts a pyro fuse, but not like your regular pyro fuse like we've been trying to find on this car. The pyro fuse on an Audi e-tron is actually inside the battery, and if the one on this one is inside the battery, that means we're going to have to go hunting underneath the car and touching that 400 volt system, which I don't really want to do. Now, there is a way to hopefully find out whether it is or isn't on that battery. And to start with, we've got to install the battery charger again onto the car. I'm just going to hang this in place because, of course, I haven't got the brackets yet. I've then got to plug this plug back in. By unplugging it, it isolates all the high voltage system. and by plugging it back in, it creates it active again. Now the pyro fuse, after an accident, is set off from a signal from the ECU, which then breaks the fuse, stopping the car from being able to send power to the starter motor. But on a hybrid, it stops the power being able to leave the high voltage system. And on the Revuelto, it uses the high voltage system to actually start the car. So in a way, it is the starter motor.
Right now, my plan is not to try and start the car because there's no coolant in the battery system and there's no coolant in the engine system. But we do have good power here. We do have good power on that side. Obviously brakes are at fault because we've got no fluid in the brake. There's no coolant in it. Just explain what I just explained. Vehicle electrical system fault, which is what I am worried about.
Now previously, I plugged in my diagnostic tool and it wouldn't read the car. But since then, I've paid for an update on it. And I'm hoping now it'll allow me to read all the fault codes on it.
Oh. It's now read it as a Revuelto, so maybe updating this has worked. Come on, read it, baby. Vehicle diagnostic protection unlock is required.
So it looks like Lamborghini have locked the ECU, well, the OBD reader so you can't read it through the OBD. So you used to be able to read your own cars, but look, now, for me to read this car, I've got to purchase an unlock. How much is it? Let's purchase by year because we're going to be unlocking this a lot. $120 per year for me to read this car. Well, we have no other choice and we're going to have to do it. That is paid for and now I should be able to read it. This is insane. The way this is going with car DIYing, it won't exist in years to come if it keeps going like this. It's going to be harder and harder and harder. But after I'd paid, it let me read the codes on the Revuelto. And upsettingly for me, I saw something I didn't want to see.
There we go. High voltage fuse C. Crash shut off triggered.
My suspicions were correct. What we've got to do to get this pyro fuse out of the battery, I don't know. Has anyone ever taken a battery out of a Revuelto? Probably maybe one person watching who probably built them, or no people watching. I don't know how we get it out. Are we going to get it out from underneath? Do we have to get it out from inside the car? I don't know. I thought this was going to be easier. Clearly not. Another step into the unknown. We've now got to find where this pyro fuse is, which has got to be somewhere around the huge battery that runs down the middle of the car.
I found out a few things. One, you can't buy a pyro fuse separately, and I don't blame Lamborghini. They don't want people like us messing around with pyro fuses. So, you can see here the full battery system, which is 400 volts, which is located underneath the car, but sits in the center console. Now that full battery system is £31,000 plus VAT. So we don't actually need the full battery. We don't need it. We think the battery is fine. But the pyro fuse, what I've learned, is usually located in this thing here, which is, it's a junction box, but apparently in electrical terms, it's called the penthouse of the battery. You can see the whole junction box is a separate part, but unfortunately, the battery junction box is not available at the moment. You can't buy that separately. So I'm hoping we can actually get to it, one, without taking the whole battery down, and two, hopefully we can find the pyro fuse inside that. Let's see. Let's see. The rubber gloves are definitely coming out for this one.
Can you do that on the battery?
Here's the battery. This is the underneath of the battery. And on the e-tron, there is about 900 million thousand bolts to lower the battery down, but there's no bolts in here. So to get the battery down, from what I've seen when they've assembled these Revueltos, what I've seen from assembly footage, is that all the bolts of the battery are inside the center console, so you have to undo these from inside to lower it down. So that means a full interior strip down, so I'm hoping we don't have to do that. But on that diagram that I just shown you, it looks like the junction box is underneath this. And if it is underneath this, and the pyro fuse is in it, we've got very, very lucky.
Hopefully this is the answer to the broken pyro fuse.
Okay, that looks promising.
Come on then.
I'm hoping it will be.
Let's do it.
Right, here we go. Do not put your fingers on them. There's 400 volt DC current in this battery, and if you were to accidentally touch it, it's definitely not going to be a good day. Although this connector, with all the smaller wires on, are just signal wires, which communicate with the ECU inside the car. It's the orange wires we want to be careful of. Now, there's loads of bolts holding this penthouse box to the battery of the car. Look at that. Wow. Yeah. Now what we've got to find in all of this is the pyro. Unfortunately, that wasn't going to be easy. They've put as many components as they can in a really tight space. And a lot of these components, we don't know what they do. Apart from this thing here, which is called the battery control module, which is a separate computer for the high voltage system. And Audi actually advised on the e-trons that you replace this during an accident. But the issue for us, you can't actually buy this part separately. Oh, there it is! There it is! So we've got to find a way around that as well. There's the pyro. That's the pyro, so it is... We know it's the pyro because it's just literally that airbag connector, and it's the same on every single car. The bolts are underneath. Oh, Susie. What are we going to do?
Does that mean you have to undo these? See these ones facing down to pull it
I
up?
think the whole thing's got to be... The bolts are coming from underneath. Does this come out? I've now got to figure out how we get that pyro fuse out. So I'm going to start stripping apart this out. Hopefully I don't perish. And in the meantime, Bob's back. Bob is going to do some welding because we've got some damage on there. So he's going to start going over there and we're going to hand you over to Bob. And in the meantime, I'm going to be stripping this computer module apart. Let's do it. Here it goes then. I don't know how far I've got to strip this thing apart before I can get to the pyro fuse, but one thing's for sure, I've got to remember how it goes back together. And in the meantime, this is what Bob will be cracking on with. The damage to the chassis at the rear of the car. You can see a lot of the riv nuts have been ripped out the chassis leg. So first, Bob's going to take a few parts off it, so he's got access to it, and then see if he can repair it. Again, you can only buy this complete from Lamborghini, which is over £21,000. So if Bob can repair it, it saved us a fair bit of money. And on the other chassis leg, it's ripped off a bracket, and that bracket, which should be on the end of the leg, holds on the rear crash bar. Meanwhile, I'm still taking apart this junction box or penthouse box to hopefully get to this pyro fuse. And there's so many components in it. And whilst I'm doing that, Bob's cleaning the area where he's about to weld onto. He's now pulling off the bracket on the end of the chassis leg on the left hand side because it's slightly bent, and he's going to repair that as well. Then he's cutting out a section from the left hand side chassis leg because it's going to be a much better repair if you can replace it with one piece of metal rather than trying to fill the holes with weld. And here's the sheet metal that he's going to be using.
So we've got these plates, they're all messed up from the crash, and I have to try and put them straight somehow, try and make it work.
These are the pieces that should be on the end of the chassis leg which holds the crash bar to them. So Bob's seeing if he can manipulate that back as well. And he's just about done it for one side. Time to clean it up, and that's looking pretty good. But you can see on the other side, the oval piece has broken off it. And instead of trying to repair that, it's just gonna make one himself. Absolute skillage.
Usually I'd use a nice piece of polished steel or a folder to do this, but it's what I have up here, so.
Eventually, he's got a piece of metal which pretty much resembles the U-shaped bracket which broken off the Lamborghini. Now, time to weld it to the bracket which broke off it. And it's looking as good, if not better, as OEM. Meanwhile, I've almost stripped down this box to get to the pyro fuse. Yeah! Porsche putting the pyro fuse under the dash. Breeze compared to this one. There is your pyro fuse. So this, for some reason, is stopping power going from here across to here. So this must be the positive. I assume of the hybrid battery, which is allowing the car to start. Well, at the minute it's disallowing it. So I think let's take this off. Here we go. Look at that for a pyro fuse. That's absolutely wham. And inside that, it's not making a connection. And those little 2 pins there is the signal wires that it will get to break that connection. And that hopefully is why the car isn't starting. It's full of this weird grease. We're gonna have to try and find one of these on eBay somewhere using a part number, and they do have a part number on here. Whilst I try and find one of those pyro fuses, Bob got to work at welding all the brackets that is made onto the chassis of the Revuelto. Starting off with the ones which hold the rear crash bar on, then moving on to the piece of chassis he cut out to repair where the riv nuts are going to go. Then he took a piece of paper and placed it over the side with no damage on the riv nuts, so we could get a tracing of where the riv nuts go. Then goes over onto the other side with a fresh bit of metal installed and uses the stencil as a mirror image for where he needs to drill the holes for the riv nuts. Once those holes are drilled out, the riv nuts are installed. And that is just about done. This is the original one, and like it's literally made out of plastic. Well, with plasticine or something. But that was on there, and a bolt goes through that to hold the rear bar on, but that is fully bent. So Bob's literally just whipped one out of the bag. The repair is perfect. And if you wanted to learn how to weld like Bob, then I suggest you book in at the machine shop to do so. Your welds will certainly be better than Lamborghini's.
Machine shop's like a gym where you can get a membership, but instead of having gym equipment, we've got workshop equipment. So we've got like sandblasters, welders, mills, lathes, all sorts of stuff that you can use there. You just pay a monthly membership, you can come down and do what you want.
Back to the pyro fuse. Here is our solution. Look at this. So you can't order a pyro fuse from Lamborghini, but for some reason, AliExpress sell them, and one person in the whole of the UK was found. £120, which is the most money I've ever spent on a fuse, but that should work. It works on a Q4, it works on an e-tron, and hopefully should be exact. Don't want to mix them up now. So it only goes in one way, and it ain't that way. It's that way. Slides in there. Now I've got to figure out how all of this system went back together. And whilst we're doing that, we've also had delivered 2 braided lines which have been made for the front braking system on the Revuelto. We've had 2 braided lines instead of the rubber hoses because braided is better. Dad's going to fit them, and I'm going to do that. And at the same time, we might have one of these. This is just like a giant adult Lego set. There's only one way this goes back together, and I've got to figure it out. In the meantime, my dad's carrying the new limited edition Y-Food on his head before he starts putting in the braided brake lines on the front of the Lamborghini. You may notice on this Y-Food bottle, it even has my name on it. Do you know when you get right to the end of your Lego build and you have loads of Lego bits left over?
Yep.
That's what's just happened.
Are these all your Lego bits?
Yeah. Looks like I'm taking it apart again.
This side, all done. All hooked in where it should hook. Rubber's protecting where it should protect. But we've got to do a bit more on the other side.
I'm coming.
We've had to get a new one.
This bracket here has broken off the carbon tub. So my dad's got to get on at removing the arch lining so we can access where that bracket ripped out from. And once he's got that out of the way, he can see exactly where the rivets were in the carbon tub. On a scale of 1 to 10, how worried would you be if you've just rebuilt all that up and there's got one bolt left over?
An 8.
So for the second time, I'm taking this box apart again. And now my dad's got to rivet this bracket to the tub, which is easy enough done because the holes are already drilled out.
Job in the town. That means job well done.
Thanks.
You'd be pleased to know I found where the bolt went. And you'd also be pleased to know if I left it out, it wouldn't have mattered. Now the Y-Food is a meal replacement drink. It's not a protein shake, it's not a diet drink. It simply just replaces one meal throughout the day. I don't know how I've managed to get to this point, but I'm going to reward myself with a Y food, a meal replacement drink. 26 vitamins and minerals in this, high in fibre, high in protein, lactose-free, gluten-free, and there's no added sugar. Perfect for a meal replacement drink instead of having fast food at lunchtime, and perfect for people on the go like me. And on top of that, Kevin is on it. This drink is perfect for people who are constantly on the go, and a way healthy alternative than having fast food at lunchtime. I've been having it for years now, and my favourite flavour is Happy Banana. And for that reason alone, Y Food have done me a limited edition bottle because of it. The penthouse, aka the junction box, is complete. Light work. Hopefully that works. That is good. And go and grab the special Y Food Matt Armstrong edition. Appearing on screen right now is a discount code as well. Get them whilst it lasts. Happy Banana with Kevin on there. You've got to get it. You've got to get it. I'm going to keep one. I'm going to keep one for myself. It's time to start this thing, hopefully. Let's go. This is it then. I've now hopefully repaired the junction box with the new pyro fuse, and it's time to install it back in the car. Technically, after this, the high voltage system should be active, hence the fire extinguisher next to the ramp. I've bolted the junction box up to the battery, and now I'm connecting all the high voltage cables. I don't know what's about to happen, but we're expecting the worst. Right, I don't know what to do here. Should I leave that exposed at the minute, in case we do have to take that down again, or should I just commit to it? I'm going to leave it like that for now, just in case this doesn't work. Everything underneath the car is all ready to go, but there's a few final things on top. Okay, next step, we're not going to get it started without any brake pressure. The brake cables are now on, the braided lines. We're going to add some brake fluid. I'm hoping you don't have to do any silly procedures to bleed the brakes. So it shouldn't have lost any out the back. Put some fluid in, bleed it all up, should have a pedal then. My dad's now pouring in some Valvoline .4 brake fluid into the brake system, and then we've got to bleed the brakes. And to do that, we're attaching Mr. Push, as we like to call it. It screws onto the brake reservoir, adds pressure to the brake system, and then my dad can go round on the front calipers and crack the bleed nipples, letting all the air out of the brake system. Once he's happy with that, the bleed nipples go back on, and we'll see if we've got a pedal. Of course you've got a pedal. Once that's out the way, I can now start assembling this area with the new plastic shroud for the heater box inside the car, and then of course the battery charger along with the bracket which holds it in. Then I can connect up the cables to that. And lastly, the seats back from AutoTrim. Look at that. I reckon they've put a bit of leather in here, this one, and then use this original leather, but that is a banging job and like a 24-hour turnaround. But now they're going to hate me for saying that, because those people are going to bring their seat there and say, can I have it in 24 hours? Airbags in there. I think we could put this in. That is all the airbags in. We activate the hybrid again, and then we see if we can clear the codes off the BMS and give this thing a start up. Manifest. Once we get this seat in, the car shouldn't recognise any more deployed airbags. Just another thing that might stop the car starting. There we go. Right, hybrid connected back up. Now the 12 volt. And as I mentioned, all the 12 volt does is power up the body electrics. We have done an absolute mazzolina with the pyro fuse. New pyro fuse is in. Battery management system we've done nothing with. Although Audi advised that you reset it on the e-trons, we're going to try and reset it on this. We've got no coolant in the battery hybrid system. That could potentially stop it from starting. We've got bled brakes, so we should have brake pressure. We haven't refilled the oil for the differential. I don't think that will stop it from starting. At the back, still got damaged suspension here, damaged rear steer, and a damaged shock absorber. I don't think that will stop it from starting. Those parts haven't arrived yet. This radiator and hoses are damaged. They're for the engine cooling. I don't think that will stop it from starting. We've got no exhaust. I don't think that will stop it from starting. And there should be oil in it. That should help it start. Let's see if we can cancel codes. This could go two ways now. Here goes nothing. Time to turn the ignition on. Vehicle electrical system fault. We've still got that vehicle electrical system fault. Drive system fault. No coolant, okay. We've got charge in the battery. Come on, we need a huge moment now. Let's see if we can get rid of the code that we had at the start of this. Right, we've got a load of faults still. I'm gonna try and clear them. Now the good news is, I didn't have any fault code for the pyro fuse anymore. So before I did anything, I thought it was worth just trying to start it from the off.
Turn the little twizzly thing, remember?
Turn the twizzly thing, we're in sport.
There you go. Try it now.
But it didn't seem to want to go.
Vehicle electrical system failure.
We can't ring anyone. We can't even call Lamborghini because they wouldn't know, legitimately wouldn't know. No one's done this, so it's literally for us to figure out, and as soon as we've figured it out, then we can proceed. But although we didn't have the code for the pyro fuse, we did have one code left over. Crash shut off triggered. Can I erase it? I'm gonna try and erase it first. Still there. Crash shut off triggered. We need to untrigger that. Reset battery junction box.
That sounds good.
That sounds like it. But if only it was easy as just pressing that button. There was more hoops we've got to jump through. So this gets more ridiculous by the minute. Not only have I spent £120 to be able to read the car, I've now got to spend an extra £15 to get in deeper so I'm allowed to reset the airbag module. I've paid that, but now to get through even further, to let me do that, it's asking for a photo ID, a picture of my photo ID, which I've got on my phone, but it's also asking for a photo of me holding my ID. Next thing I've got to do, spin around, touch the ground, roll around 3 times to get into this system. So this is what I had to do. Right, I've submitted.
Review.
2 business days! We're going to get the video out in 3 days!
Is that how long it says?
Yeah! We'll now complete the review within 2 business days. You can use limited functions for now. For urgent use of the full function, please feel free to contact us.
And now someone's got a photo of you looking like a mug.
A day has passed. I've had an email, and apparently my thing has been accepted. So we're back to where we are. We've got all fingers crossed. We're going to go again. We're going to go again. The instructions on the Autel just told me to reset all adaptations. To take the car basically back to how it was when it left factory. This is definitely just a button bash. It's a button bash, isn't it? After I did that, it started to smell a little hot at the front of the car. I think the water pump for the electrical system started running, but it was running dry.
It smells really warm.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's normal or not, but it hasn't got any coolant in. But we're putting coolant in the back, but you're meant to vacuum fill it. And to vacuum fill it, guess what? You need the Autel to open up all of the thermostats in the electronic system so the coolant can flow from the back to the front. You got battery coolant and engine coolant.
Oh, those are 2 separate. That's for the battery.
That's for the battery. This is for the engine. So that's why it's not pouring out that radiator there, because that radiator is for the engine, and then that one's for the.
Push will fit the.
Don't think it
won't fit, will it, on there?
Now you're supposed to vacuum fill the coolant to make sure that there's no airlocks. And when we was filling the coolant up at the back of the car and I unscrewed the bleed nipple, no coolant was coming out, so it weren't getting to the front. But then we had an idea.
You're going to use a leaf blower?
Can that go in there straight in and just send
It's
it?
going to just fly around the side.
No. The leaf blower was going in the coolant reservoir. It's working! It was actually pushing coolant through the system. Not quite a Lamborghini tool, but the coolant was now getting to the front.
Oh yeah, it's out.
So we could re-plug the bleed nipples there. Whoa!
Whoa!
There was one on the lower left radiator and one right in the middle. Once they were plugged, it was almost ready to go. Here's the plan then. We think it might start because it smelled electrically as soon as I cancelled the code out. So our plan is, because we're scared of starting it up in here, because it is literally the unknown, we're going to just put on what we've got of this rear suspension, which is that top wishbone and that suspension there. We do still need the rear wheel steer because that's broken, and we do still need this drop link because that's also broken. But by putting those 2 on, it should be enough to whack a wheel on all 4 corners and roll it outside, because if anything happens, I'd rather it happen outside than in here. So first off, let's start getting these off. Broken. We suspect this to be bent. Yeah, it is, look. See the edge? Ever so slight there. Okay, I'm going to put this on first though, because this will be easier to access now. Right, all that is on. The only problem is that rear wheel steer, but that should allow us enough to get the wheels on and roll this out, and then we can fill the coolant and hopefully get a full start on this thing. Let's get some wheels on it. We were feeling hopeful. This was going to be the first time the car's been on all 4 wheels since the crash, and some wheels need replacing.
It's like hypnotising.
But before it goes out, it needs to be able to see where it's going. One headlight.
Ooh.
Now it can see. I don't know why I needed to put the headlight in, I just wanted to. It just looked a little bit more like a car. Just hope it started like one. First time on all 4s since the accident, so even if it doesn't start, we have made some form of progress. Now, we're gonna push the car outside just in case anything bad happens. This whole thing has been a learning curve, and even if it doesn't work, we've made a lot of progress. Let's just hope now we hear that V12 roar. This could be sketchy. 82% battery charge, 90% of fuel, and 5 miles on the hybrid. I've got a brake pedal. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm gonna try it. Let's do it. Go on. Still nothing. No. It's not gonna go, is it?
What do you reckon?
I reckon it's not gone.
Toby, I just clicked a button. HV system release lock after crash. Active. Could do it. Hold remote key to the back. It's gonna start. It's gonna start. It's gonna start. Ready? Come on. Why won't you go? Why won't it go? Despite me getting rid of loads of the codes and no codes for a pyro fuse anymore, the car still wouldn't go. It's so frustrating because it wasn't clear what was actually wrong. As it was getting later in the day, we decided to call it quits. We just felt defeated, and I really wanted to get this car started, not only for all of you guys, but for me as well. To do all of that work with no result couldn't be any more annoying. But I guess it's not a fairy tale. But the only code I have left, I think, is on the battery system, which is, look, crash, shut off, triggered. And that is going to be the biggie code. Crash, shut off, triggered. And like you think, I've paid all of that, done all my ID, gave everything away, and I can't erase that code. And then if I try and go into basic setting, then it can tells me here, reset battery junction box, which is what I need to do. But if I go into there and press start, it's out of range. And so that means I can't do it. And the only way to do it is to do the security access login. And to do a security access login, you need a special code. And the special code is apparently that. Service not support, ineffective format. So this is stupid. There's not many cars which defeat us, but it's starting to look like the Revuelto might be one of them. And our only hope now is going to be from Lamborghini themselves. And I doubt they're going to want to help us. Thanks so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button. Hope one day we get the Revuelto started. Peace out.
Do Do you remember how it went together?
No.
Like a drug that I just can't deny.